They say prosperity builds nations, but sometimes it is desperation that changes the world. Picture a country drowning in debt, a currency collapsing, merchants ruined, a government so bankrupt that it cannot pay its own soldiers. This was not Argentina, not Greece, not even Weimar Germany. This was the Dutch Republic in the early 1600s, a nation so fragile, so new, and so financially unstable that many Europeans believed it would not survive the decade. Yet from this failing state, from a government in chaos and a people on the brink, emerged one of the most powerful inventions in human history, the modern stock market. The irony is staggering. A nation with no king, no natural resources, and barely any land created a financial system that would one day rule the global economy. To understand how this happened, we must travel back to a windswept corner of Europe, a land reclaimed from the sea, defended by dikes instead of armies, and held together not by royal decree, but by collective survival. The Dutch Republic was born out of rebellion. Its people fought the Spanish Empire, not just with weapons, but with an economy built on ingenuity, trade, and risk. But rebellion came with a price. War drained the treasury, trade routes were disrupted, and the cost of independence pushed the young nation to the edge. This was a country built on failure. Failed crops, failed governments, failed alliances, and yet it had one extraordinary strength: its merchants. Dutch traders were bold, disciplined, and relentless. They crossed oceans that swallowed weaker empires, mapped routes no European had dared explore, and returned with spices, porcelain, silk, and unimaginable wealth. But to fund these dangerous voyages, they needed something the world had never created before: a way to pool risk on a massive scale. A single ship to Asia required the resources of an entire town. Losses were catastrophic. Storms, pirates, disease, all could turn a fortune, and no family, no small group of investors could shoulder that burden alone. The Dutch tried everything: short-term loans, ship partnerships, rotating capital, but nothing could stabilize long-distance trade. It was then that the government, on the brink of financial collapse, authorized a radical experiment: the Dutch East India Company, the VOC. It was unlike anything Europe had ever seen. For the first time in history, investors could buy shares in a trading company. These shares represented fractional ownership, not cargo or debt. The company's profits, not the survival of a single ship, determined returns. And most revolutionary of all, shares could be bought and sold freely whenever investors wished. This tiny failed republic had accidentally invented permanent capital, corporate ownership, and modern liquidity. But innovation rarely emerges without chaos, and Amsterdam soon became the center of a new kind of madness. A marketplace of voices. Ships unloading rumors at the docks. Merchants shouting prices across taverns. Speculators placing bets on voyages they had never seen. This was the world's first stock exchange, a place where fortunes shifted with the winds that guided European sails. Prices rose and collapsed within hours. Market manipulation was rampant. Insider information spread like wildfire. Options, short selling, and even futures contracts appeared almost instantly. Not because regulators allowed them, but because traders invented them on the spot. Amsterdam was not just a marketplace. It was a laboratory of financial experiments, a playground of ingenuity and greed, a mirror disturbingly familiar to the modern world. What made this possible? Strangely, it was the weakness of the Dutch state itself. The government, desperate for stability, lacked the power to interfere. So merchants governed themselves. Market rules emerged from necessity, not legislation. And in this evolved faster than in any empire of the time. Out of a failed nation came the foundations of global capitalism. Publicly traded companies, shareholder rights, limited liability, market liquidity, diversification, speculative trading, corporate governance, and the belief that wealth could be created by risk rather than birthright. The Dutch Republic did not conquer the world through armies. It conquered it through finance. Its navy protected trade, but its stock market powered an empire without borders. Even after the Dutch Golden Age faded, Even after rival nations rose and crushed its political influence, the financial tools it created lived on. London adopted them. New York perfected them. Now every nation, from Singapore to Sao Paulo, relies on the blueprint created by a country that almost collapsed but instead reshaped the world. And this leads us to a deeper truth. Financial innovation does not come from strength. It comes from necessity, from crisis, from failure. The Dutch invented the modern stock market, not because they were wealthy, but because they had no other choice. And that raises a question for us today. Which struggling nation, facing debt, inflation, or instability, might unknowingly be building the next great financial revolution? History suggests that the future of global finance will not be created by the strongest economies, but by the ones fighting hardest to survive. But to truly understand how a failed republic created the financial engine of modern civilization, we need to zoom in to the docks, the counting houses, and the crowded alleys of 17th century Amsterdam, where ordinary people did something extraordinary. They democratized wealth. Before the Dutch, investment was something only kings, nobles, or church officials could afford. But the VOC changed everything. Anyone, bakers, widows, carpenters, even sailors, could buy a tiny share of a ship that would cross half the planet. A nation of common people became shareholders. Risk the burden of the elite. It was a shared national endeavor. This was the first time in history that everyday citizens could participate directly in international trade. Not through taxes, not through labor, but through ownership. And ownership changed the psychology of an entire country. People followed the monsoon winds as closely as they followed politics. They studied spice prices in Java as carefully as bread prices in Amsterdam. For the first time, global economic knowledge flowed into the hands of the public. The Dutch became financially literate, not because they were taught, but because they were invested. Yet with opportunity came instability. Amsterdam's markets turned into a theater of human behavior. Fear, greed, hope, panic. Everything that defines markets today was already present 400 years ago. Speculators invented short selling to profit from uncertainty. Risk-takers introduced leveraged bets to amplify gains. Rumor mongers spread false information to manipulate prices. The financial system grew faster than anyone could control, and the consequences were inevitable. Booms, crashes, euphoria, collapse. The first great financial bubbles were not born in London or New York. They were born in this tiny republic fighting for survival. And yet, every shock taught the Dutch something new. They refined corporate structures, improved accounting, developed auditing standards, created regulatory practices, strengthened investor protections. Each crisis forced evolution, not destruction. By the time Britain took global dominance in the 18th century, its financial system was not an invention of the crown. It was an inheritance from Amsterdam. The Bank of England copied Dutch models. London's markets copied Dutch trading floors. Even British government bonds were modeled after Dutch state finance. The very idea of a national debt, except credibility. This fragile nation of floodplains, windmills, and rebellion created the securities that fund modern democracies. Today, every pension fund, every stock exchange, every multinational corporation, every retirement portfolio, every index fund, every IPO is a descendant of the Dutch experiment. A failed state, desperate to survive, accidentally built the architecture of modern capitalism. But here is the final truth, the part history does not emphasize enough. The Dutch did not invent the stock market because they were clever. They invented it because their backs were against the wall. Financial creativity was their last defense against collapse. And this reveals one of the most important economic lessons ever recorded. Nations innovate most when failure is no longer optional. From the ruins of crisis come the blueprints of the future. So the next time a country faces hyperinflation, debt default, or economic meltdown, remember the Netherlands of the 1600s, a republic predicted to fail that instead reinvented the world. Because hidden inside every economic collapse is the possibility of a revolution. Not the kind fought with soldiers, but with ideas. Ideas that turn weakness into strength. Ideas that turn risk into opportunity. Ideas that turn a desperate nation into the birthplace of the modern financial system. And perhaps, somewhere in the world today, another failed state is unknowingly building the next